Let's set the scene. Picture this. It's a stormy night, November 24th, 1971. A man casually steps onto a commercial airliner, pulls off what should be an absolutely impossible midair heist, and then he literally vanishes into the dark. I mean, it sounds exactly like the plot of a Hollywood thriller, right? But it's actually one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. Today, in this explainer, we are unpacking the true unsealed files of the D.B. Cooper mystery. So, let's dive right in. Our story kicks off with this incredibly, chillingly calm passenger sitting in seat 18C. He orders a bourbon and soda, like you do, and then casually hands the flight attendant a note. When she kind of absent-mindedly pockets it, he stops her and says, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." And then he just cracks his dark briefcase open just enough for her to see this tangled mess of red sticks and wires. There's no screaming, no panic, just cold, calculated extortion. Part 1. The Thanksgiving Eve Hijacking. Okay, the timeline for Northwest Orient Flight 305 is incredibly tight. They take off from Portland, Oregon, and the bomb threat happens right around 3 p.m. Fast forward to 5 p.m., they land in Seattle, where he lets the 36 passengers go in exchange for his demands. And then, by 8 p.m., he's back up in the air, making his escape. Oh, and here's a really fascinating detail for you. The media totally immortalized him as D.B. Cooper, but the $20 cash ticket he bought actually said Dan Cooper. The famous DB initials? Yeah, that was just a wire service mistake that somehow stuck forever. So you might be wondering, who exactly was this guy? Well, 2 flight attendants spent hours observing him, and their descriptions were nearly identical, painting this stark, almost cinematic picture. We're talking mid-40s, a sharp business suit, white shirt, a black rain overcoat, and a black JCPenney clip-on tie. Later on in the flight, he even threw on a pair of dark wraparound sunglasses. They said he spoke intelligently, kept his voice low, and really didn't have any noticeable accent. Now, his demands were just purely audacious. $200,000, and he didn't just want a check or a lump sum. He demanded it exclusively in $20 bills, packed tight into a knapsack. On top of the cash, he wanted 4 parachutes and a very specific flight path down to Mexico City, making sure to tell the pilots to keep the plane below 10,000 feet. He even added this line to his note: "No funny stuff or I'll do the job." Part 2. A leap into the dark. Getting his hands on the money was really only half the plan. The sheer sensory nightmare of how he escaped is honestly hard to wrap your head around. Somewhere in the sky between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, Cooper lowers the rear staircase of the Boeing 727. He steps out into a literal 200-mile-per-hour wind. It is pitch black outside, it's pouring freezing rain, and because of the thick cloud cover at 5,000 feet, you can't see the ground at all. And remember his outfit? He just plunged into the freezing Washington wilderness wearing essentially a trench coat and loafers. The second he vanished from the radar, the FBI launched what would become one of the longest, most exhaustive investigations in its entire history. They codenamed it NORJAK, which stands for Northwest Hijacking. This massive file brought the full, heavy weight of federal investigators right into the mystery. It's an investigation that would ultimately span 45 years and look into more than 1,000 potential suspects. Part 3. The Physical Evidence. For a crime of this magnitude, the physical evidence was just frustratingly scarce. Cooper left behind that black JCPenney clip-on tie on the plane, which, actually, scratch that, it was a huge deal because it yielded a DNA sample years later. But the biggest break, that didn't even happen until 1980. That is 9 full years after the heist. A young boy was building a campfire with his dad on a beach at Tina Bar and stumbled upon a rotting package of $20 bills. It totaled exactly $5,800, and the serial numbers were a perfect match to Cooper's ransom money. Now, how it actually got to that specific riverbank, well, that remains intensely debated. More recently, a group of amateur scientists who call themselves citizen sleuths put Cooper's discarded tie under an electron microscope, and they discovered over 100,000 particles on it. Among those were some pretty rare earth elements: cerium, strontium sulfide, and pure titanium. Back in 1971, those specific elements were heavily used in the aerospace industry, specifically at Boeing for their supersonic transport project. So this brings up a wild theory. What if Cooper wasn't a career criminal at all, but actually an aerospace engineer or manager? Part 4. The Prime Suspects. Let's look at the suspects. First up is Richard Floyd McCoy. Just 5 months after Cooper vanished, McCoy hijacked his own Boeing 727. And get this, he used the exact same rear staircase method, asked for 4 parachutes, and literally used the phrase, "no funny stuff," in his bomb note. It was a perfect mirror of the crime. But the FBI ultimately had to rule him out. The flight attendants didn't think he looked like Cooper, and official records showed McCoy had a rock-solid alibi. He was eating Thanksgiving dinner with his family in Utah the day after the Cooper hijacking. Even though he wasn't Cooper, McCoy's own story has a totally wild ending. He was caught for his copycat heist and got slapped with a 45-year sentence. But then he actually managed to escape from a Pennsylvania prison, only to die later in a dramatic shootout with FBI agents down in Virginia. It just really underscores the intense, high-stakes nature of the guys pulling skyjackings in that era. Okay, next suspect is Dwayne Weber. Weber's entire case is built around this incredibly eerie deathbed confession he made to his wife, where he just looked at her and said, "I'm Dan Cooper." After he passed, his wife Jo started uncovering all these bizarre clues. Like he would sleep talk about leaving fingerprints on a plane, he had this mysterious knee injury from jumping out of an aircraft, and he even took her on a vacation to the exact beach where the ransom money was found years later. Former lead FBI agents actually felt her story had serious credibility, but once again, they eventually rolled him out as the definitive guy. Our third major suspect is Kenneth Christensen, which really gets the inside job theory going. See, Christensen was a former flight purser for Northwest Orient Airlines, literally the same airline that was hijacked. He loved bourbon, he made a super cryptic deathbed confession to his brother, and he mysteriously bought a house right after the heist. But the FBI ran into some major contradictions. He didn't perfectly match the physical description. And more importantly, Christensen was a highly trained paratrooper. And as we're about to dive into, the FBI strongly believes Cooper was anything but a professional jumper. So there is this massive divide between the pop culture myth and what the FBI actually thinks happened. The myth tells us Cooper was this tactical mastermind, a real James Bond kind of paratrooper pulling off the perfect crime. But Special Agent Larry Carr, who took over the case in 2007, argued that Cooper was really just a doomed amateur. Think about it. Out of the 4 parachutes they gave him, Cooper accidentally grabbed a non-functional training chute that was literally sewn shut. And the functional chute he did take, it couldn't even be steered. The FBI concluded that absolutely no experienced jumper would ever plunge into a freezing storm at night wearing loafers. They're pretty convinced he just perished out there in the elements. Part 5. An enduring mystery. Now, from a legal standpoint, air piracy only had a 5-year statute of limitations back in 1971. So if Cooper survived, theoretically, he could have just walked free after 1976. But the law definitely wasn't going to let that happen. A grand jury strategically indicted him under something called the Hobbs Act. This is a federal extortion statute that has absolutely no statute of limitations. The message was crystal clear. If Cooper was ever found, whether it was tomorrow or 50 years down the road, he was going to face justice. But finding him proved to be literally impossible. In 2016, after 45 years of dead ends, false confessions, and an investigative file that physically measured 40 feet long, that's huge. The FBI officially closed the NORJAK case. They redirected their resources elsewhere, which effectively left finding the truth squarely in the hands of historians, amateur sleuths, and internet detectives. And that brings us to the ultimate question. Just look at the facts we've gone over today. The incredibly precise planning, the rotting money washing up on that riverbank, the sewn-shut parachute, and the sheer brutal hostility of that freezing storm. Did a sharp-suited mastermind actually pull off the impossible and just walk away into a brand new life? Or did the story of Dan Cooper end brutally in the pitch-black Washington woods? The FBI file might be closed for good, but the true unsolved case of the hijacker who disappeared is far from over. Thanks for exploring this mystery with me on This Explainer. Keep asking those questions, and I'll see you next time.